Brazil. A nation in its own league. A gigantic society occupying about half of the entire South American continent. The fifth largest country by size and population, standing at more than 8.5 million square kilometers and around 212 million inhabitants. But let's get to the important stuff. What's Brazil's connection to beer? Along with the colonial histories of the other nations in North and South America, beer is a new component to the Brazilian shores, an import that came with the invading Europeans. 1500. The Portuguese. Quick recap. Portuguese explorers in search of the shores of India land in modern-day Brazil in the year 1500. They immediately claim the territory for their motherland. Brazil would obtain its independence in 1822 from the Portuguese. In 1888, a momentous year in the country as Brazil finally outlawed slavery, setting free more than 4 million of its inhabitants. The 20th century would bring good times and, well, bad. This included a controversial revolution, the construction of one of the world's most recognizable statues, as well as the construction and deconstruction of a military dictatorship. With its large service offerings and rich natural resources, Brazil was one of the fastest-growing economies in the world from 2000 to 2012. However, the nation continues to struggle with the large gap between the haves and the have-nots. But let's go back and discuss what we're all here to learn about. How did Brazil develop its love for beer and eventually become the world's third largest beer market? We'll have to venture back a few hundred years to where it all began. The Dutch. It wouldn't be until the 1630s that beer would most likely appear in what we know now today as Brazil. And it likely wasn't in the hulls of Portuguese galleons, but rather brought by the Dutch in their efforts to colonize a portion of the Brazilian coast. The Dutch seized a section of the eastern coastline of Brazil in their attempts to establish their permanent South American colony. This beer-loving European nation would have brought provisions of ale in their colonial quest, marking a continual trade of beer across the Atlantic. But the Dutch colony in South America would be short-lived, lasting only a few decades, and with their departure, left a lengthy absence of beer within Portuguese-Brazilian culture. The British Empire would make their appearance in Brazil during the beginning of the 19th century, as their alliance with Portugal brought British naval and military forces for defensive protection against potential aggression from Napoleon's French forces. English servicemen, as part of their service rations, were allotted a healthy quantity of beer. But like the Dutch, the English came and went. With the appearance of beer coming and going throughout Brazil's history, you may be wondering, when did it finally stick? What was the driving force to Brazil's love of beer, and what kept it in place? If it wasn't the indigenous population, or the Portuguese, or the Dutch, or the English, who was it? Did you guess the Germans? In terms of European ancestry, Brazilians in the 21st century can trace their roots back to a few primary nations. The lion's share of Brazilians are of Portuguese ancestry, followed by Italy, Spain, and Japan. But following behind in fifth place are Brazilians of German ancestry, as a total of 260,000 Germans settled in mostly the southern Brazilian states between 1824 and 1972. And of course, accompanied with these German settlers were the profound brewing traditions. The first German-Brazilian breweries were located in the states of Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, Santa Catarina, and Rio Grande do Sul. With a much warmer climate, it was initially more difficult for the German brewers to cultivate quality barley and hops. but the crafty brewers would eventually learn to master their new territory, creating a growing demand for lager-style beers throughout the 19th century. Macro domination. The 1880s were a very important decade in Brazilian brewing history, as two of the country's principal breweries would open their doors: Cervejaria Brahma in Rio de Janeiro and Cervejaria Antarctica in Sao Paulo. These two companies, along with a handful of others, would dominate the entire Brazilian beer market, doing an adequate job in weaving beer culture into the fabric of Brazilian society. After going toe-to-toe for more than a century, these two beer behemoths would eventually join forces in 1999, creating a new entity altogether, America's Beverage Company, or InBev for short. This would be the beginning of a chain reaction, the end result being the colossal creation of an international beverage company, the likes of which had never been seen before. 5 years later, in 2004, InBev merged with Belgian company Interbrew, the proprietor of Beck's, Stella Artois, and many others, creating the merged entity InBev. Don't think we can get a bigger brewing company than this? Just you wait. Skip forward another 4 years to 2008, and we see another merger, the merger to end all mergers. InBev, the Brazilian-Belgian conglomerate, would strike a deal with American brewing beast Anheuser-Busch, leading to the massive international brewing company we know today, Anheuser-Busch InBev, or perhaps better known as AB InBev. It's captivating to witness the immense growth and success of two small Brazilian breweries, ending up as part of the globally dominant enterprise with annual revenues of over $50 billion, and a whopping 28% of the entire global beer market. In Brazil, AB InBev brands make up almost 70% of the entire beer market. Craft beer. Now, what about craft beer? Has this particular explosive piece of North American culture migrated down below the equator? The answer is absolutely it has. Brazilians, like Americans, are having a greater interest in diversifying their brew palette, desiring the possibility of moving away from solely indulging in classic light lagers. In larger urban settings like Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, it's common to find a collection of craft breweries in many of the hip and trendy areas. Be sure to check out our upcoming beer travel episode where we showcase the city of Sao Paulo. In this warm and vibrant country, a cold cerveja accompanied by the pool or on a soft sandy beach is commonplace for many Brazilians all across the country. With its grand connection to its crisp, refreshing lagers, something that is loved by Brazilians of all legal drinking ages, it will be interesting to see if the more complex flavors of the invading craft beer world can penetrate the armor of the global Goliath, AB InBev. Be sure to subscribe and check out our next episode, where we travel beyond the European continent once more to visit the true land down under, Australia. Thanks very much for watching, and remember, craft beer is here.